He was 41 years old, and for the next 8 years until his death, he remained incapacitated. Jackie Wilson did not collapse due to a stage accident. It was the moment that ignited the most haunting chain of rumors in music history, where stories of Hollywood's backstage hand began to call his name like a spine-chilling echo. Nothing was ever proven, but the deeper one digs, the more ambiguous details emerge with suffocating clarity. If you think you already know the truth, prepare to be shaken. So much was never spoken. Before we step into the secret behind the curtain to discover what was once obscured, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. If anyone has ever stood in a crowded theater when the music suddenly stalls in midair, they must understand that chilling sensation that leaves you unsure whether to keep breathing or stop. That night in 1975, everything happened so abruptly that no one had time to realize they were witnessing a moment that would forever become a poignant mark in music history. The contradiction was immediate between the dazzling stage spotlight and a moment so unnatural that the entire audience thought it was a meticulously calculated part of the performance. No one suspected that just a few seconds later, they would face an indescribable emptiness, a feeling that many say they can never forget. Jackie Wilson walked onto the stage that night with the familiar swagger that audiences had loved for years, a confident smile, eyes bright with fire, and the posture of a man accustomed to conquering every gaze. He was not just an artist, he was a symbol of a powerful rise, one who carried many of the challenges that people in his community still faced every day at that time. There was something in his voice and in every smooth, physical turn that made people feel he wasn't just singing. He was telling the story on behalf of too many ignored hearts. So when the night began, the entire auditorium was pulled into a familiar emotional spiral. No one guessed that the next few minutes would be remembered for a lifetime. Lonely teardrops played with an energy that made many jump to their feet, unable to sit still. Some audience members recalled that they could still see every blue light beam reflecting off Jackie's sweat-soaked hair, as if he was transforming into the song itself. Lonely, intense, proud. And then, mid-sentence, Jackie's body tilted strangely. People described it as not a scripted stage move, nor a real fall. It was something in between those two extremes, leaving the audience trapped in a few brief seconds of confusion. A few people in the front row applauded the kind of applause reserved for an artist deeply immersed in his role. They had no idea that at that very moment, Jackie Wilson was suffering a severe heart attack. Under the stage lights, his body seemed to be slowly giving way with no one quick enough to catch him. Recounts say Jackie's expression then was not that of a performing actor, but of a man clinging to the last reserves of his strength. But the audience couldn't immediately tell the difference. They were so used to Jackie's fervor that they mistook the collapse for a dramatic emphasis of the song. Then, with a slight turn, his legs gave out completely. A few small cries rang out but were swallowed by the music and the applause. Someone recalled that an audience member near them was still smiling, whispering, "This performance is so real." It wasn't until the sound was cut, the music vanishing suddenly, as if someone had abruptly pulled the plug, that confusion crept into every row. The next few seconds felt like minutes. The stage lights shifted to a suspenseful state, not entirely off, but not bright enough to reassure anyone. Those sitting far away only saw a figure lying there, and other figures rushing toward him. Fragmented whispers started to rise and spread faster than a loudspeaker. Is it acting? No, something seems wrong. Is it some kind of trick? No one knew which was true. Stories recounted by those backstage said that everyone was shaken at that moment. Some were so startled they froze, unable to move because they didn't understand what was happening. Others tried to remain calm to help, but they also admitted that the scene then was like someone had drained all the sound from the world. One only heard gasping breaths, hasty footsteps, and anxious calls. The moment Jackie Wilson fell marked the beginning of a long, heartbreaking period for his fans. He fell into a state of incapacitation and could not recover as before. This is not a rumor or an embellished story, but a recorded truth. A legendary stage performer collapsed in the middle of his signature song and could never return to the spotlight again. But what made that night unnatural was not just the sudden incident. It was the ambiguity between performance and reality that gave it the color of an unspeakable mystery. The audience truly didn't know what to believe. The way he fell, not suddenly enough for people to immediately recognize the danger, but not natural enough to look like a performance, created a void full of doubt. That void stretched out like an enigmatic echo that followed Jackie Wilson's career and legacy. Some people from that era, even years later, still said they heard something strange in Jackie's voice just before he collapsed, as if he had a premonition. Naturally, these are only recounted stories. No one can verify them, but it was those very fragmented accounts that made the atmosphere of that 1975 night both real and phantasmal. People always felt like they were touching some secret, something just beyond their sight. In the shadows of the stage, a part of the musical soul seemed to be left behind. There was no rhythmic applause, no cheering, no lively laughter, only stunned dismay spreading like a cold wind, slowly but penetratingly. Those who were there described the feeling as if the music, the very thing Jackie dedicated his life to giving soul to, was suddenly suspended, unsure whether to continue or stop. And then the show ended in a silence no one wanted to recall. But that silence was only the surface. Beneath it, the rumors began to sprout, spreading from the audience seating to the backstage corridors. Not because people wanted to speculate, but because the way everything happened was too sudden, too ambiguous, too easy to make people feel that something was amiss beyond their comprehension. People whispered to each other, as if afraid that speaking louder would cause the truth, or something they didn't yet understand, to emerge from the darkness. That night, the music truly paused, but not just the music. The audience's faith in what they were seeing also paused. The event was not just a fall, but the genesis of a series of unnameable feelings, a void that extended long afterward. And in that void, the name Jackie Wilson kept echoing, full of poignancy, full of mystery, as if he had left an ellipsis in the middle of a song whose rest no one had time to write. There are moments when the silence after a chaotic event is even more terrifying than the chaos itself. When Jackie Wilson was taken backstage that night, the atmosphere changed in an inexpressible way, like a room full of smoke. But no one could find the fire. No one dared to speak loudly. No one dared to laugh. No one dared to show too much anxiety. The entire backstage area was engulfed in a strange feeling, the kind of feeling one gets after witnessing something they are not sure they saw correctly. Technicians ran back and forth, but they ran in silence. The performers standing in the wings held hands tightly, not out of closeness, but because they needed an anchor to believe that things were not as bad as they thought. Someone recalled feeling a chill rising from the floor, even though it was just normal wooden groundwork. But when a performance shatters like that, every sense seems to be magnified. And then, as all mysterious stories begin, the whispers slipped through the curtain cracks, climbed the walls, and wound around everyone. At first, it was just a small phrase. Did he really collapse? Was that not an act? But only a few minutes later, the question transformed into something entirely different, more vague, darker, a form of suspicion that everyone felt but no one wanted to voice. A female singer who performed that night recalled that someone gently nudged her shoulder and whispered, "I heard his health hasn't been good for a while, but the way he went down, it was strange." That single word, strange, was enough to open the door to a barrage of speculation. People are always drawn to anything that seems ambiguous, half true, half false, especially in the entertainment industry of that era, where rumors were faster than the stage lights and more potent than the cheers. Some tabloid newspapers in the 70s were ready to cast their net the moment they heard any piece of information. Just one person muttering something like, "Could something be going on behind his back?" And that comment was instantly spun into a newspaper article with a gloomy headline. Something like "The Shadows Behind the Star." Such articles rarely offered proof, merely amassing a few recounted phrases from anonymous sources and plastering them with a sensationalist veneer to sell more copies. But precisely because of this, they spread quickly, fueling the public's suspicion. The truth is, Jackie Wilson's health before that night was not stable. Medical records later showed he had been showing signs of weakness, with prolonged periods of fatigue that worried his family and team, but the public at the time did not think so. They saw Jackie on stage as a flame, and people do not imagine a flame can simply fade. Audiences in the 70s, especially in the soul and R&B communities, always needed a hero to stand tall against all odds. So when they witnessed that fall, their natural impulse was to search for a cause that was more dramatic, more surprising, more mysterious, simply because the human heart detests ordinary truth. They wanted a reason powerful enough to explain why a man as strong as Jackie collapsed right in the middle of a song in front of hundreds of eyes. And so the theories began to circulate. One audience member said they heard someone exclaim, "Someone was staring intently at him from the back rows tonight." But that was merely a word-of-mouth account. Some people in the industry at the time quietly discussed the influence of backstage power groups. But these were all rumors with a mystical flavor, never supported by clear documents or witnesses. The very people who brought up the term often spoke in muffled half-sentences, as if they feared that saying more might accidentally touch upon something they shouldn't. A backstage technician recounted that while checking the stage lights, he heard a group of people whispering, "This is not simple." Someone once said Jackie seemed uneasy lately. But the phrase, "someone once said," is the most fertile ground for speculation. No one dared to point out who said it, nor confirm they heard it firsthand. It was all just tiny floating bits of information colliding with each other and transforming into a story larger than itself. At that time, the public was addicted to the feeling of surprise. They believed in backstage stories and believed in things that had a faint smell of secrecy. They liked the feeling of something behind the lights, as if artists on stage were always facing unseen challenges. That is why the rumors surrounding Jackie Wilson became increasingly uncontrollable. One fan recounted that, for many years after the 1975 incident, they remained haunted by the way Jackie collapsed, as if he was not just exhausted, but had just heard some shocking news. But that was only a personal feeling, a vague impression amplified by the pain of a fan witnessing their idol fall into a critical state. All those whispers, those unsaid thoughts, those broken conversations, they were like thin smoke strands swirling backstage that day. No one could catch them. No one could distinguish what was real and what was fabricated, but they formed a curtain. No one saw clearly what was behind it, but everyone believed that something was waiting to be revealed behind that drape. And that night, when the backstage door closed, when all the sound equipment was turned off, when the footsteps of the last people leaving echoed lonely and scattered, the whispers still did not stop. They clung to the walls, the floor, and the costumes that hadn't been taken off. They lived on as if to remind everyone that Jackie Wilson's collapse was not simply a heart attack, even though factually it was. But people always believe in what makes their hearts beat faster, and the rumors were what began to push that story beyond the scope of a single performance to become a mystery that everyone wanted to touch, even if only with a fingertip. After the night, the stage fell silent. The city's atmosphere seemed to change color, not the color of mourning or exhaustion, but the color of suspicion. A suspicion so thick it made people feel something was hidden wherever they looked. When an artist of Jackie Wilson's stature collapsed right in the spotlight and no one understood why, the natural question arose: what really happened? And that very moment, devoid of an easy answer, opened a game of chess no one knew they were playing, yet everyone was drawn into its echoes. Entertainment investigative writers of the time, those who made a living by recounting rumors, gathering gossip, and catching the pulse of showbiz, began searching for clues in their own way, not to find the truth, but to find the most compelling story. One person wrote a long, dramatic article opening with the sentence, "A man like Jackie does not collapse just from exhaustion." That statement instantly ignited the public's imagination, even though the author later confessed he merely let the story flow with emotion and had no evidence. The 70s was the era of vague anxieties, a time when the public was familiar with half-light, half-dark rumors.